This hook sets a mysterious, emotional, and introspective tone, perfect for a speech inspired by Jungian depth psychology and spiritual symbolism. Would you like a few variations Idonji shorter? More poetic or more dramatic, pain is often seen as a malfunction, an error in the human system that must be fixed, numbed, or eliminated. But what if this understanding is shallow? What if pain, rather than being an enemy to conquer, is a messenger bearing truth from the depths of our being? Every pain we experience, whether physical discomfort, emotional sorrow, or spiritual emptiness, carries with it a secret meaning that is not immediately visible to the rational mind. It is not simply a random occurrence or a meaningless inconvenience. Instead, pain can be understood as a symbol, a reflection of something hidden, unresolved, or forgotten within us. There exists a realm of the unconscious mind, a vast territory beyond our daily awareness, where unresolved conflicts, repressed emotions, and neglected aspects of the self reside. This unconscious content, when left ignored for too long, seeks expression, and it often chooses pain as its language. The body and the psyche are deeply interconnected. What the mind cannot process, the body often absorbs. Thus, pain emerges not only as a biological response, but also as a psychological and spiritual cry for attention. It may be trying to draw our awareness to a truth we are avoiding, a pattern we are repeating, or a voice we have silenced within ourselves. Pain often appears when there is a profound misalignment between our outer life and our inner truth. It may reflect the gap between who we are and who we pretend to be. A person who suppresses their emotions to maintain peace may develop anxiety. Someone who buries their desires to meet others' expectations may feel a deep and unexplainable sadness. These expressions of pain are not errors to fix, but signals to interpret. They are not enemies, but mirrors that reveal what lies behind the mask we wear. To understand pain in this symbolic way requires a shift in perception. It means we must begin to view life not only through logic and surface appearances, but also through intuition, reflection, and a willingness to engage with the unseen forces that shape us. Pain, then, becomes the psyche's symbolic language, its way of pushing what is unconscious into our awareness. When we stop seeing pain as meaningless suffering and instead begin to ask what it represents, we take the first step toward transformation. The soul does not communicate through the same language as the mind. While the conscious mind uses reason, words, and structure, the soul speaks in images, symbols, sensations, and patterns of feeling. Pain is one of the soul's most powerful forms of expression. It does not argue or persuade, it simply is. When words fail or the mind refuses to listen, the soul turns to pain as a way to make itself heard. In this sense, pain becomes not just a symptom, but a sacred form of communication, a signal that there is something within us in need of recognition. Unlike everyday language, symbolic language does not explain, it reveals. It bypasses intellect and speaks directly to the inner self. Pain may show up as a tightness in the chest, a recurring illness, or a deep sadness that cannot be traced to any one event. These are not random occurrences, but meaningful expressions. They emerge when some truth has been denied, when the soul's needs have been overlooked, or when the path we walk no longer serves our inner growth. The pain becomes the soul's alarm, not to punish, but to awaken, to shake us from the numb trance of routine and force us to feel what we have long ignored. This symbolic nature of pain also explains why two people can experience the same event but respond with vastly different forms of suffering. What one person suppresses, another may confront. What one person spiritualizes, another may pathologize. The difference lies in how each soul chooses to communicate with its host. Pain becomes personalized, shaped by our deepest stories, archetypes, and emotional wounds. It's less about the event and more about what that event represents to the unconscious self. When pain is understood this way, it begins to resemble the dream world, a landscape where logic gives way to metaphor. Just as dreams are not meant to be interpreted literally, neither is pain. A stomach ache may symbolize more than just a dietary problem. It may represent a truth we're struggling to digest. A headache may signal a mental conflict we have refused to face. Pain carries the hidden messages of the soul in the same way myth, art, and ritual do, through depth, through symbol, and through a language that cannot be fully grasped by analysis alone, but must be felt, entered into, and respected as sacred. In the modern world, we are conditioned to fear pain and to eliminate it as quickly as possible. The first response to discomfort is often to numb it, distract from it, or suppress it with medication, entertainment, or business. This automatic reaction stems from the belief that pain is unnatural, that it has no purpose other than to disrupt our lives and rob us of peace. But in doing so, we silence something far more profound, the voice of our own inner truth. Pain does not arise by accident. It comes with intention as a signal from the deeper layers of our being. And when we continually refuse to listen, it only returns louder, more persistent, more difficult to ignore. We live in a culture that values comfort over consciousness. Anything that causes distress is labeled as a flaw to be fixed, rather than a message to be understood. Yet pain has always been one of the most honest and direct forms of inner communication. It doesn't lie, it doesn't flatter, it reveals, often brutally, what we would rather keep hidden. And so, instead of asking ourselves why we are in pain or what meaning it holds, we ask how to get rid of it. This bypassing of the inner message leaves the core issue untouched, allowing it to fester beneath the surface and manifest in even more complex or destructive ways. To truly listen to pain requires courage. It demands that we pause, turn inward, and become radically honest about our lives. It may mean facing uncomfortable truths about a toxic relationship we've been tolerating, a path we've been walking that no longer aligns with our values, or a part of ourselves we've been denying for too long. Pain asks us not to escape, but to examine, not to numb, but to notice. It is a call to become conscious. When we ignore pain, we reject a vital opportunity for self-discovery. We refuse to enter into a dialogue with the soul. But when we begin to ask, what is this pain trying to show me? We create space for transformation. That question alone opens the door to healing, not superficial relief, but deep integration. It shifts the relationship from one of resistance to one of reverence. And in that shift, we begin to uncover truths that would otherwise remain buried in silence. Within every human being lies a shadow, a collection of repressed emotions, unacknowledged impulses, and forgotten experiences that we have pushed away in order to survive, to belong, or to appear acceptable in the eyes of others. These are not just negative traits or flaws, but also strengths and truths we were once told not to express. Over time, the shadow grows not only darker, but heavier, pressing against the edges of our consciousness, seeking a way to emerge. One of the most common and compelling ways it does this is through pain. Pain becomes the manifestation of what we refuse to feel or face. It takes form as anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, restlessness, or even physical illness, not because we are broken, but because we are disconnected from parts of ourselves that we have exiled into the unconscious. This pain is not random, nor is it purely physical or emotional. It is symbolic, pointing us to the very places in our psyche that require attention and integration. When we experience deep emotional suffering, it often mirrors some part of our shadow that we have failed to embrace. A person who was taught to be endlessly kind may suppress anger until it becomes unbearable tension in the body. Someone raised to always succeed may bury their fear of failure until it erupts in the form of crippling anxiety. These pains are not just psychological, they are the soul's attempt to restore balance and truth by forcing us to reckon with what we've left behind. Avoiding the shadow only amplifies its power. The more we reject or deny aspects of ourselves, the more fiercely they return, often disguised as suffering. Pain then becomes a kind of spiritual pressure, the force that arises when the conscious self is out of alignment with the unconscious. It demands we stop pretending, stop performing, and finally confront the parts of us that we have long abandoned. This confrontation is not easy. It can be terrifying to meet the anger, grief, envy, or fear we thought we had buried forever. But within this meeting lies an opportunity, not just for relief, but for wholeness. By facing our shadow through the language of pain, we begin to reclaim what was lost, to reintegrate what was split off, and to move toward a more authentic and complete self. Pain is often the first sign that something within us seeks change. Not just change in our outer world, but a deep inner shift, a transformation of the self. When we experience suffering, it may appear as a burden, an obstacle, or even a punishment. But in truth, pain functions as an invitation to grow. It is a portal, a threshold between who we have been and who we are meant to become. The discomfort we feel is not simply a consequence of life's chaos, but a necessary pressure that pushes us beyond our current limits. It demands our attention because without disruption, we would remain asleep to the deeper dimensions of who we are. In many ancient myths and spiritual traditions, the journey of transformation begins with pain. The hero is wounded, exiled, betrayed, or shattered before discovering their true power. This pattern is not just literary, it mirrors a psychological and spiritual truth. Transformation rarely begins in comfort. It starts in crisis when the structures we've built, our identities, beliefs, and patterns begin to fall apart. Pain strips away the false layers, the masks we wear to protect ourselves, revealing the raw and vulnerable core of our being. It is in this moment when we are most exposed, that we are closest to real change. Rather than viewing pain as a dead end, we must begin to see it as a beginning. It is the soul's way of saying, you cannot continue as you are. This doesn't always mean immediate answers or clear solutions, but it does mean movement toward truth, toward integration, toward authenticity. Pain wakes us from the sleep of unconscious living. It asks us to step through the fire and allow ourselves to be reshaped. That reshaping may feel like destruction at first, but it is in fact creation, the birth of a deeper self emerging from the ashes of the old. The transformation that pain initiates is not a surface change. It is not about becoming a slightly better version of what we already are. It is about becoming someone we have never fully allowed ourselves to be. This is why pain must be honored, not avoided. It is the sacred beginning of the journey inward, a call from the depths to cross into unknown territory, to face the mystery within, and to emerge with a clearer sense of who we truly are underneath all our defenses, roles, and illusions. ChatGPT said the body and the psyche are not separate realms, though we often treat them as if they operate in isolation. In truth, they exist in deep and continuous dialogue, each reflecting the state of the other. When emotional wounds remain unresolved, or when psychological tension builds up without release, the body often becomes the vessel through which these inner struggles express themselves. Pain, illness, fatigue, and tension can be physical echoes of emotional or spiritual imbalance. Rather than being merely mechanical failures, these physical symptoms may be symbolic expressions of something deeper, surfacing from the unconscious to be acknowledged and understood. Every physical symptom carries a message, a kind of metaphor hidden beneath the surface of biology. A tight throat may point to words unspoken. Chronic back pain may represent emotional burdens that have become too heavy to carry. Digestive issues may reflect an inability to process emotional or psychological experiences. These are not merely poetic associations, they are patterns observed again and again in those who have dared to listen to their bodies as messengers, not just machines. When we are unwilling or unable to express our inner truth, the body often steps in to express it for us. This does not mean we should abandon medical understanding, but it does mean we must widen our perspective. Modern medicine often addresses the symptom while ignoring the story beneath it. But the body does not lie, it reveals. It becomes a mirror, showing us where we are not in alignment with ourselves. When we experience persistent physical pain or illness without an apparent cause, it is often the unconscious trying to push something into awareness. It may be grief we've never processed, anger we've never allowed ourselves to feel, or fear we've hidden behind a mask of control. The body responds because the soul cannot be silenced forever. True healing begins when we treat the body not as a battlefield, but as an ally in the journey toward wholeness. Pain is not the problem, it is the pointer. The body, in its wisdom, signals what the conscious mind has refused to confront. When we bring awareness to these signals, when we listen with openness and humility, we begin to bridge the gap between the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknown. The body becomes not just the site of suffering, but the sacred ground where healing and transformation begin. To suffer consciously is to allow pain to become more than just torment. It becomes a process of awakening. Most people suffer unconsciously, meaning they experience pain passively, allowing it to overwhelm, define, or destroy them. They resist it, numb it, or distract themselves from it, never asking what it means or why it has come. In unconscious suffering, pain deepens the division within the self. It feeds fear, resentment, and helplessness. But when suffering is brought into consciousness, when we meet it with openness and curiosity, it transforms into a doorway, an entrance into deeper self-awareness and spiritual maturity. Conscious suffering requires that we stay present with discomfort rather than fleeing from it. It means allowing the full weight of emotion, sensation, and vulnerability to be felt without judgment. It invites us to witness our pain rather than be consumed by it. In that witnessing, something shifts. We begin to notice patterns, repeating cycles of thought, emotion, or behavior that have shaped our lives without our awareness. We see how old wounds have influenced present choices, how unmet needs have disguised themselves as anxiety or anger, and how we've avoided responsibility for our inner world by blaming external events. In this space of attention, suffering becomes teacher, not enemy. There is profound dignity in conscious suffering. It means we are willing to face our pain not as victims, but as participants in our own evolution. We step out of the passive role and begin to engage actively with what hurts. This does not mean romanticizing suffering or seeking it out, but rather honoring it when it comes. We begin to ask, what is this pain here to teach me? What part of me is trying to speak through this experience? What am I being invited to change or let go of? These questions open a sacred dialogue between the conscious self and the soul. As we begin to answer them, the nature of pain itself changes. It may still hurt, but it no longer feels meaningless. There is a sense of purpose woven through the suffering, a quiet wisdom that begins to emerge. Conscious suffering brings integration. It draws together the fragmented parts of the self and allows us to move through life with greater clarity, compassion, and depth. It is the act of turning inward instead of outward, of choosing depth over distraction, and of trusting that within our most painful moments lie the seeds of profound personal transformation. Healing is often misunderstood as the complete erasure of pain, as if wellness can only be measured by the absence of discomfort. But this view is rooted in avoidance rather than truth. Real healing does not mean that pain disappears. It means that the pain is no longer meaningless. It means that the suffering we once tried to escape has been faced, understood, and integrated into a broader narrative of growth. Healing is not the return to who we were before the wound, but the emergence of a more whole version of ourselves, one who has lived through pain and discovered something deeper on the other side. Pain, when met with consciousness, begins to reveal layers of personal truth. It forces us to slow down, reflect, and ask difficult questions. Why does this hurt? What am I not seeing? What am I holding on to that no longer serves me? These questions do not eliminate suffering, but they shift our relationship to it. Pain becomes less of a curse and more of a guide. It takes on a shape, a reason, a message. Once we begin to extract meaning from it, we are no longer trapped in it. We are walking through it, engaging with it, learning from it. This process can be difficult, especially in a world that offers endless distractions and instant relief. We are encouraged to bypass pain, to move on, to silence our grief and suppress our fear. But doing so only ensures that the wound remains open beneath the surface. It festers in our thoughts, our bodies, our relationships. Healing requires us to do the opposite, to lean into the discomfort, to explore the wound with honesty, and to ask what truth has been buried there. That truth, once seen, transforms the pain into something sacred. Meaning does not erase pain, but it redeems it. It offers us a sense of coherence, a thread that connects our suffering to our story, our identity, our evolution. When we understand why we hurt and what the pain has taught us, the suffering becomes a source of wisdom, compassion, and strength. It becomes something we can carry with grace, something that reminds us not just of what we've endured, but of what we've become. Healing, then, is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of a more intimate and meaningful relationship with it. Pain often arrives uninvited, disrupting the flow of our lives and confronting us with sensations we would rather avoid. Yet beneath its surface lies something far more profound than mere discomfort. Pain carries with it a hidden message, a sacred code written in the symbolic language of the soul. Each ache, each wound, each moment of inner turmoil is encoded with meaning that, when deciphered, reveals a truth about who we are, what we carry, and what we are being called to become. But this code does not yield itself to those who rush past it or bury it beneath distraction. It opens only to those willing to sit with their suffering and ask what it is truly trying to say. The process of decoding pain requires patience, presence, and a willingness to look beyond appearances. It asks us to slow down and observe what the pain evokes within us. What memories surface? What emotions arise? What patterns repeat themselves? These questions begin to reveal that pain is rarely about the present moment alone. More often, it is the resurfacing of something older, something unresolved, a buried experience, an unmet need, a silenced part of ourselves demanding expression. When we begin to follow these threads inward, we start to understand that pain is not meaningless. It is meticulously connected to the story of our inner world. Symbols are the native language of the unconscious. Pain expresses itself through this symbolic system, using the body and psyche as instruments. A recurring illness may symbolize a fear that remains unspoken. Emotional heaviness may be the weight of ungrieved loss. Even the timing and location of pain can offer clues, pointing toward the specific dimensions of life where change is needed or where truth has been suppressed. When we view our pain through this symbolic lens, it transforms from an obstacle into a compass. This is not a purely intellectual exercise. It is a deeply intuitive and emotional journey. It is about entering a conversation with the unseen aspects of the self, listening not with logic alone, but with openness, imagination, and reverence. Pain ceases to be a dead end and becomes a teacher, one that guides us toward forgotten truths, buried emotions, and long neglected aspects of our soul. The sacred code hidden in pain is not meant to be decoded all at once, but to be gradually understood through courage, self-inquiry, and a commitment to living more honestly and consciously. There is a paradox within pain that the conscious mind often struggles to grasp. The very thing we seek to avoid may be the very thing that sets us free. The wound, raw, painful, and unwanted, is not merely a source of suffering, but a potential source of awakening. In the deepest recesses of every wound lies the possibility of light, insight, and transformation. This idea runs through ancient myths, spiritual traditions, and psychological truths alike. The broken place is not where the story ends, it is where it begins to shift, to evolve, to transcend. The pain becomes sacred not because it feels good, but because it opens the door to a part of ourselves that we could not otherwise access. When we are wounded, emotionally, spiritually, or even physically, our defenses begin to weaken. The persona we've crafted for the world starts to crack. In that space of vulnerability, something real can finally emerge. Pain exposes what is authentic. It tears away illusion and reveals the parts of us we've been hiding. What rises from this exposure is often uncomfortable grief, rage. Pain is not here to destroy you. It's here to reveal you. When we stop running from it and start listening to it, we discover that every wound carries wisdom and every struggle holds the seed of transformation. The journey through pain is not the end. It's the beginning of becoming whole, loneliness, longing. But these emotions are not weaknesses, they are the truth of our human experience. And when we allow ourselves to feel them, to honor them, we begin to integrate them into our understanding of who we are. The light that enters through the wound is not external, it is internal. It is the self rediscovering itself beneath the roles, expectations, and societal masks we wear. Often we only begin to ask the important questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? What truly matters? After something in us breaks, it is in this breaking that we are emptied of what no longer serves and made ready to receive something new. The wound then becomes a point of entry, a sacred threshold through which the soul whispers its deepest wisdom. This kind of transformation cannot be forced or rushed. It happens slowly in layers as we learn to stay present with our discomfort, to stop running from the ache and to meet it with compassion. As we do, the wound begins to shift in meaning. It is no longer a scar to hide, but a symbol of survival, of depth, of growth. And within that symbol is the quiet but undeniable presence of light, light that was not found in spite of the pain, but precisely because of it.